Welcome to ReApproaching Adulthood. My name is Tyree Elaine, and this is my second time doing a podcast. I deleted the first one a few years ago because it was about my experience with dysfunctional family, and even though it was helpful to some, I was so unprepared for the amount of negativity that I got from others, especially since these people weren't even denying the dysfunction, but were more so focused on shaming me for simply talking about it. I got messages calling me a snitch, disrespectful, and disgusting for throwing my family under the bus. And these were all from people much older than me. I was really shocked because these are the same type of people who have no problem letting the manager of Popeyes know that their order is not hot and will happily let everybody in the nail shop know when they don't like this one nail. So I know they know how to hold people accountable when they're wrong. Yet when it comes to family, they still believe that what goes on in this house stays in this house. But what went on in my house and stayed in that house ended up being full-on abuse that nobody would fix until I actually said something. And even when I did say something, I was criticized for how I said it on some, you should have done it this way or that way. I was held more accountable for how I handled abuse more than the abusers themselves. What type of shit is that? And it was all by elders or elder presenting people. Because just like how all mothers don't function as healthy mothers, all elders do not function as healthy elders. And I know it's probably one listening to this right now talking about these kids ain't shit. All they want to do is complain, but they don't offer any love, no wisdom, no understanding, no healthy solution, no mature communication, just judgment. It's almost like they choose to see everybody younger than them as a child who should still be seen and not heard, even though we are all adults. For context, I'm 37 years old. Shout out to the other 80s babies and 90s kids who probably know at least some of what I'm talking about. Okay, so I have been no contact with my mother and relatives for 5 years now. At the time, I didn't realize the seriousness of ending relationships with my family because honestly, I think I was in shock for a long time. I am going to explain why I went no contact in this episode, and for those who like to read receipts, the actual text messages of what happened are on IG, TikTok, Facebook, and if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be at the end of this video. Before I get into it, I want to give some background that I don't think I've ever shared before. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, South Central to be exact. Shout out to Fishtown on Arlington and 52nd. They was my very first emotional support seafood spot. And I think that's where Darnell took Brandy on Thin Line Between Love and Hate when she was like, oh, it's so greasy. Yes, it is. And it's bomb too. Anyway, my parents had me when they were both 20 years old. And we all lived with my grandfather in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house like the ones that were in Friday and Boys in the Hood. Sometimes my uncle, my mom's older brother, would stay there too. And although that sounds like a lot of people, I used to be so happy when we were all home together. When I was around 5 or 6, me and my dad took the Dash bus to the beach. He rolled up our pants legs and we walked hand in hand with our feet in the water. It was so beautiful. And that was the last positive memory I have of my father. FYI, I will forever be grateful to have that memory. So when we left the beach and got back to the house, my parents got into it about something and my mom asked my dad to leave, but he wouldn't. So my grandfather calmly introduced a firearm to the situation. It wasn't dramatic. He just sat it down on the arm of the couch. My dad got the message and then he kneeled down, grabbed me by my shoulders and was shaking me saying, I love you. I love you. Don't ever forget that I love you. I didn't know how to respond to this. So I remember laughing even though it was not funny. I was just nervous, like I was baby Joker or something. After my dad left, my uncle moved out but would still visit. So my grandfather ended up doing most of the dad stuff that my dad used to do for me. Side note, this is the most I've ever said the word dad in one sitting. Anyway, one of the only things my grandfather could not do that my dad did was pick me up from school. So I went to Angeles Mesa at the time, which was right around the corner from our house. And the night my dad got kicked out, my grandfather told me that if I saw my own father at school the next day to run. And I laughed. And this was not nervous laughter either. I really thought about it in my mind and said, yeah, that's funny because what I look like being at school running away from my own father. First of all, this nigga is freakishly tall and would have probably caught me. Then I wouldn't have been able to stop laughing. But my grandfather made it very clear that he was serious. He wanted me to run. So I think I asked him something to the effect of, can you please just pick me up from school? And that was the first of many times my grandfather told me the story of how when he was my age, he walked all the way from Monroe, Louisiana to Oakland, California in the snow with no shoes on. Somehow that meant I should be able to run away from my dad if I needed to. Well, I didn't see my father again until I was 13 at his sister, my auntie's bomb ass backyard barbecue boogie birthday party. I went up to hug him and he moved back to give me a handshake, bitch. And I'm using bitch as an expression because, bitch, that was the last time I saw that man to this day. But my father wound is a whole nother episode. Once my mom became a single mom, she was very angry and bitter unless she had a decent man. There was this one guy she dated who lived in our apartment complex one of the few times we moved. And I remember her being happy then. So I do have a frame of reference for my mom being happy and me feeling loved. When I was a little older, we moved back to my grandfather's house, and I could tell I was in my Rudy Huxtable season 8 weird phase because I was being treated like a burden and ugly and unwanted and in the way. And some of those things were said directly to me by elder presenting people who were quote unquote just playing. Anyway, I realized that at 5, I was cute, but as I turned 7 and 8, time was clearly up for me. And I accepted that I wasn't really lovable anymore. It felt like any form of kindness from anybody was doing me a favor. And I was definitely on some, please, sir, can I have some or when it came to attention. For context, I am an only child on both sides and the youngest cousin on my mom's side, the primary side. So I had to really sell it for anybody to spend quality time with me. And if I had to guess, just purely based on the vibes, I would say that at this time, my mom felt like she fucked up her life by having me with my dad. I remember being a little girl constantly thinking if I wasn't born, my mom would be happy because she was asleep most of my childhood, probably depressed. But I was just a kid and I didn't know that. I thought she just needed me to wake her up. Most times, my grandfather or uncle would tell me to leave her alone and that they would play with me. But these was grown ass black men. Like I would color with my grandfather, but he would make me color Ariel and Cinderella and Snow White black. I would try to explain to them that they're not actually black, but he wasn't trying to hear it. And a lot of times I would just like being in the same room as my grandfather. And I Love Lucy was my favorite show, but he refused to watch it because they didn't have no black people in it. There is actually one black person in the train episode. I tried to tell him, and he told me that one nigga is not black people. So he got me a little black and white TV and put it in his room on his dresser for us to watch TV in the same room together. He will watch In the Heat of the Night on his TV, and I will watch Lucy on mine. Ironically, I felt so loved. At some point, my mom got us a dog, and I would even spend a lot of time playing with the dog outside. But I really, really wanted to spend more quality time with my mom or dad. All that other attention was great, but I really needed my mom. I really needed her to not be depressed. But as I got older, she got meaner and it felt like my very existence disgusted her. I had a lot on my mind growing up in the hood, just like any other little girl. School, boys, friends, my appearance, the world, my thoughts, my interests. It just felt like every time I tried to connect with her, she hated that. And I felt less and less important. I felt like my thoughts were less and less important. How I felt was less and less important. There were way more bad days than good, and I was so confused about what was happening. So I asked my mom straight up if she loved me, and she responded just like this: "Nah, I'm just making you spaghetti because I don't love you." Now, I understood sarcasm at that age. I was about 7 or 8. So I knew that was just her way of saying yes, but why was it so hard for her to just say that to me so I could feel loved? It's like if you deal with a nigga and you ask him directly if he was at that bitch house and he sarcastically says, "Yeah, and I had a lot of fun too." Like, nigga, I know what I'm asking might be wild, but I'm asking for a reason. Needless to say, I had to pretend like I believed my mom loved me, even though it felt like she didn't. As a matter of fact, it felt like she hated me. I can't remember a time past maybe age 6 when my mom looked at me with warmth or happiness or even genuine pride. It was always this look of absolute disdain. And for years, I looked in the mirror and saw what she saw, nothing of value at all. Unless my hair was flat iron bomb, then it was nothing of value at all, plus like 3. But overall, I grew up feeling ugly. There's a meme going around with the caption that says, "Sound out this acronym," and the letters ended up standing for the apparently common phrase, You look just like your ugly ass daddy. Isn't that wild as fuck to say to a child or anybody for that matter? I'm going to say it again. You look just like your ugly ass daddy. Unbelievable. How did we allow that to be a thing in the 90s? Were we too busy dancing to real love? Who knows? All I know is I hated the way she treated me, but I knew that it was quote unquote wrong to have hateful feelings, especially toward my mom for any reason. So I pretended like I didn't for most of my life. Now, I did not have the type of mom from Precious. My mother was not chasing me around the house with a George Foreman grill. There were pockets of happiness, but it was inconsistent. Overall, my relationship with my mother was strained and exhausting on my end. And yet I needed it. I was dependent on it. I didn't have a father, so where else would I go? Who else would take care of me? For third grade, I attended West Angeles Christian Academy. My mom was in the choir, and we started going to church way more frequently than before. I didn't really like it, but I was hoping it was just a phase like Tybo or something. At home, it felt like my mom was using church as a means to mask her depression. But sometimes church was cracking because West A in the 90s was a very real vibe. I still listen to music from that time today and love it. I really liked the feeling of community I had from church. I was raised in church. And even if some of it was fake, I still felt pretty safe with everyone until one day. My mother starts quote unquote dating this minister, let's call him Louis. My mom acted so different when Lewis was around, and I couldn't stand it. It was like she was a little girl or something, and that scared me because I was an actual little girl. Everybody in the family did not like Lewis because he took advantage of my mom and manipulated her using God and church, but nobody, as far as I know, has ever told her that directly. One night, while me and my mom were living with my grandfather, my mom was out with Lewis, and my grandfather told me to take a shower since it was getting late. As I was clearly in there, someone walks in, and I thought it was my mother, but it was Lewis, smiling and moving toward me fast. I screamed so loud that he fell backwards into the hallway and ran out. I hurried up to slam the door, and all I was thinking was, how did this nigga get in the house without my mom, and why isn't she racing in here to check on me? Please bear in mind, there were two bathrooms in this house, so this was no accident. Several minutes later, I collected myself by myself, put on my pajamas, walked in the living room from the bathroom, and saw Louis sitting on the couch with his arm around my mom's neck, smiling. In that moment, I knew I could never tell her what had just happened. It was like she was under a spell that kept her bound to whatever this nigga said and wanted. There was another time shortly after that when she wanted to leave me alone with him to run to the bank, and I said, please don't. She would regularly ask me if he'd ever done anything to me, and because he never got a chance to, I'd tell her no. But she never asked that about my father or my uncle or my grandfather or any other guy she was seeing, quite possibly because I felt safe with them. There were even nights that I'd stay up crazy late to watch my uncle play Mortal Kombat until he reached the boss level. I thought that was the coolest shit ever, by the way, but I couldn't tolerate even being in the same room as Lewis if it was almost dark outside. There's an episode of The Simpsons where Bart was saying his goodnight prayers on some God bless mom, dad, Lisa, Maggie, and oh yeah, please kill Sideshow Bob. And I used to do the same thing. I prayed every night that God would just let this nigga have it. I wanted so badly for my grandfather to do to Lewis what he did to my dad. So that shower shit happened when I was like 9. And the following year, when I was 10, Lewis used the house phone to make a personal call. And usually, when I would see adults do this at other people's houses, they would step outside on the porch or go in the kitchen. But this nigga went in my bedroom, touching my fucking cotton candy body sprays and my nano pets and my hair stuff. And he had a horrible smell for a black minister, like burnt plastic, a terrible odor. So I did not want him touching my stuff. Then he sat on my bed and I said, fuck that. Not out loud because I was only 10, but I got as far as the hallway before my mom stopped me and said, don't bother him. You probably just want to go in there because he in there. You don't even need nothing out of your room. And all I thought to myself was, why are you okay with a grown man in my bedroom taking a personal call? In a minute, this nigga gonna start playing with my Lisa Frank stickers and I'ma lose it. But of course, I didn't say any of that. I just suppressed my emotions, and for many years pretended like their behavior and relationship was not incredibly inappropriate for a Christian, a minister, a mother, or an adult. And I never said much about it because every time I tried to hold her accountable, she would remind me that, quote unquote, she's grown, and then threaten to send me to live with my dad, knowing full well that he was in jail. So I felt hella stuck for a long time. Additionally, this man would do my mom so dirty and make her cry to the point where I felt responsible for comforting her. And my mom didn't need no help feeling bad about herself. Yet every time this nigga would come around, he'd just cause chaos and nobody would say anything to her about it. When I tried to say a little bit about it to somebody else, I was just told to stay in a child's place. There are so many other details that I'll talk about in other episodes, but I wanted to set up the scene for clarity. I went no contact in 2019 because after the documentary Surviving R. Kelly aired, everyone was posting about it, and I posted, well, can we mute ministers who do this too? And the caption read, I hope who I'm talking about sees this. Side note, that caption was really wild as fuck. I had not read it in a long time, but when I did, I was like, oh yeah, I could see how he would be scared. So less than 10 minutes later, my mom texts me basically saying, did Lewis ever do anything to you? I've asked you for years. She said a bunch of other stuff, but what really made me feel comfortable telling her was when she said, please tell me so I could make it right. So I told her, and I thought she was going to call, but she texted that I, quote unquote, handled it wrong, and that I only posted what I posted to hurt her because people might guess what minister I'm talking about. Then she accused me of being jealous of their relationship. And at that point, I did not have a mother anymore. That one word made me question if I ever had a mother. It was like my inner child whispered to me, bitch, I told you. I blocked her right then and there because I was hurt but not shocked. I obviously was not jealous of my mom at 9 years old or any other age, but her accusation made me consider if she was jealous of me. And if so, for how long? Was all that misguided anger and depression from my childhood really jealousy? Is that why I felt like nothing I ever did was good enough for her to like me or love me or protect me? Did she teach me to hate myself on purpose? A lot of things started making sense. And that was the beginning of my life after no contact. Again, the actual texts are on a video with smooth jazz playing in the background for balance. They might be triggering, by the way, so please remember to breathe if you're going to read them and you are in a similar situation or were in a similar situation. I will unpack more on the next episode. This was my first time expressing myself in a few years. I have been really depressed for a while about some things that definitely needed to happen, and with God's help and some intentionality, I'm feeling better enough to use my voice again. I did stand up comedy for 12 years and got talked too much in class for 12 years. So for me to feel like I couldn't talk about certain things for as long as I did felt beyond terrible. I am very proud of myself for finally sharing things that just felt too heavy to keep carrying. I appreciate you for listening, and I hope you check out the next episode.